Hi, and welcome to our conversation about assertiveness for life and leadership. This is being recorded. And before we even start, a couple of things. The first is for every big gathering that we do, or really any gathering that we do here at Buffalo Spirit Ranch, we like to acknowledge the traditional carers of this place on which Equus resides, the ancestral homeland of the Tasuki and the Tasuki people, the Tewa people, and the plants and animals and trees that assist us to be here at this time. And if you want to take a moment inwardly to just acknowledge the original carers of the land on which you reside, you're free to do so. We will go for about 45 minutes. And at the end of that 45 minutes, if you stick around, there is a rather generous giveaway. And so stick around. And then after the 45 minutes, those of you that are really keen on joining us for the upcoming cohort, you can stay around for another 10 minutes and we will answer any questions that you have about the course itself, you know, the structure and how it works out and the kind of assignments that we'll be doing. So stick around for that. This webinar is being recorded. We had a lot of people sign up. So for those of you that could join us, welcome. And we will also be sending this out for the folks that couldn't join us. So I want to introduce myself. I'm Kelly Wendorf. I am the founding CEO of Equus, and I'm joined by Ram Charan. Ram, you can wave so we know where you are. Ram, would you like to just say a couple words about yourself?
Happy to be here. Really excited to run this course again. Kelly and I have known each other for 30-something years now. So I just love teaching with her and really looking forward to connect with people today also.
Yeah, wonderful. So just very briefly, how we thought we might run this time together is spend just a few minutes, 5 minutes to tell you about a little bit about why we decided to do this course. And then Ram is going to lead us through a little bit of an exercise that is kind of very similar to the kind of work that we do inside the course. And then we're going to open up for any questions, concerns, challenges that you have around your self-agency, your assertiveness, because we wanted to give you a taste today of what it's like to actually work this work. Our hope is that you leave here today with some insights and some new discoveries and maybe some new ways of thinking about things. So regardless of whether you join us for this really special course, you come away today with something that's meaningful. So that's our aim for sure. So very briefly, and then I'll hand the floor over to Ram. Personally, I'll speak for myself. The reason that I chose to embark on this 14-week course in designing it and facilitating it with Ram is that I felt like there wasn't much out there that really respected the interpersonal space. There was a way that if you looked into assertiveness and boundaries and healthy self-agency, that there's just a lot of kind of separation that can happen and us and them and not really paying attention to the layers and dimensions of compassion and care and feeling each other and sensing each other that are so much at play in the interpersonal spaces. And I personally needed the work because I'm a chronic caretaker, and I was finding that everything I was doing was not working. And so we developed a program that does work. And that's a reason why I decided to make the course. Anything you want to add to that, Ron?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kelly. Another side of it is other than my personal interest in the subject, I found that as I started working as a coach, I mean, this is going back 5 or 6 years that I was starting, and I found that those of my clients who were more sensitive and empathic often lacked an ability to really assert themselves. It's kind of like we go into reasons why that is in the course, but there are things, patterns laid down early in life for people who are sensitive and tend to kind of psychically take care of the people around them, to actually have a sense that it's okay to, to take care of one's own needs in a healthy way. That is not a message that many of us are given, at a young age. So I I don't forget who mentioned it first, Kelly or I, but I said we should do an assertiveness for empaths, and that was originally what the course was called. And we're like, that's a great idea. So to echo what Kelly said, assertiveness courses are typically, it makes you think of like something from the 1970s where people are insulting each other and all that, and we just decided it really deserves much finer and more subtle exploration than that. And as Kelly said, really compassionate assertiveness. How does that softness and the strength, how do those mix? So the course goes in great detail on the many layers of that. And I found that in researching and teaching the course, for one thing, I love teaching it because the work is so powerful that every time we go through it, I have deeper learnings. And I realized that, I was somebody who also had places where I would not assert myself. And in doing that, I began to build up resentments. And so when I did assert myself, it would often come out way too strong and completely blow up a situation. And I've really learned how to recognize and not not engage in that way so much anymore. So that's just one of the possible ways that it seems to help people.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd say that's it for now.
Yeah. And so we recognize that real deep, long-term, sustained change happens when learning happens through the body. So the
Mm.
coursework is, of course, it's on Zoom, but we go through a lot of different somatic exercises and practice exercises and role play and all kinds of ways that help not just the intellectual side of our learning to step up into this new place of self agency, but so that actual habits change. And so there is a lot of diverse approaches in this course. And so this is for folks who, if you know that you tend to caretake, if you know that you tend to overfunction, or maybe you overfunction in some places in your life, but you don't overfunction in others, or maybe you find that you're super checked out because you're just resentful and you're kind of tired of the world and find yourself a little bit bitter or cynical. This is definitely a place for you. And we learn about how we end up taxing our nervous system to become more and more resentful, and how that can be so corrosive to our relationships as well. We take it into professional settings and personal settings and family settings. So there's pretty much nowhere that we won't go in this topic. So Ram, I think we can move into a little bit of an experience for everyone. How
Yeah.
about we start there, and then we can open up the floor to sharing and questions and that sort of thing.
Yeah, thanks, Kali. Um, if anybody has a pen and paper handy that could be useful for this, if you don't, you can just follow along kind of just internally in your own process. And I'm going to walk us through the exercise, and then I'll throw some kind of questions into the chat as once I've spoken them. So this sort of exercise is something that we often do in the learning. Each class will tend to have a kind of a theoretical component on a certain aspect of what we're teaching, and then go into a practical exercise, and then we really unpack. People will go into breakout rooms and we'll really unpack people's experience. So this is just something I came up with yesterday around setting a boundary. I think it's pretty representative of some of the work we do. So you can start just by, if you want to close your eyes, that's fine. If you want to keep them open, that's fine. And just take a moment for an inner pause. Let yourself be in the moment and recognize, okay, we're in a webinar here. You're probably looking for information, and just notice how that you may be kind of projecting your energy out with expectation. So feel into your felt sense of place. You feel more settled in your body, and see what happens if you let go of that kind of futurizing or looking orientation, and just let yourself be present for a moment. And we often work with this sort of presencing because it's a much more optimal state for actually learning. Um, just notice where in your felt sense you may feel and let go of some tension. Where do you feel comfortable? Do you have a sense of grounding? Yeah. And then bring to mind a specific situation where you might want to set a boundary with somebody. This can be personal, it can be professional, it can be a casual acquaintance, it can be someone very close, but bring that to mind. And check in with yourself. How do you know you need to set a boundary? Is it a felt sense? It's something in the body tells you? Or is it an emotional quality? Or has there been some repetitive pattern that you've realized just ready to shift? Sense how you know that. And ask yourself what stops you from setting a boundary? What has stopped you from taking action or taking an effective action? If maybe you visualize speaking with that person or taking some action, and you may feel some sort of resistance that typically comes up that sort of stops you from going ahead and doing that. Again, just sense what that is like. And rather than staying with the name of an emotion or the story, really feel it in your body. What is that block? And then the next question is, what is it costing you to not set the boundary? And that's more of a kind of, just think that one through a bit. And what will setting that boundary allow for you? What could happen? And finally, just think if there's something that comes out of this, an action that you could take, one action that would move things in the direction of setting the boundary or addressing the situation. Just see if anything comes out that feels relatively comfortable in your felt sense. Notice what's shifted in your felt sense around the idea or the thought of setting that boundary, if anything. And you might want to take a minute or two if you have something to write on and write with. You can take some notes, anything you discovered. I wrote the process down in the chat, so it's all right there. Otherwise, just if you don't have something to write with, just kind of mentally review. Give people another minute or two with that. So I'm curious, I see people are still writing, and don't let me interrupt you, but those of you who had any sort of insight or reflection on this, you can either speak or throw it into the chat. I'm just curious, what of this, how deeply did that resonate? How deeply did you Were you able to feel things on the felt sense? And was there any part of this, like any specific question that really gave you a sense of a potential shift, or that your body told you was a valuable inquiry? Amazing how the body speaks clearly.
And as Ram says, you can raise your hand or you can throw something in the chat. Yeah, Renata says, amazing how the body speaks clearly. Yes, it does. It does.
100%.
And we work with the body a lot, what we call the somatic sense. It's a kind of fancy word that just means how our body experiences life. You can somatically experience a sunset. You know, we can say it looks beautiful, but we also feel it in our bodies, and that would be a way our body experiences it. And so we work with what we call the soma, or the body's felt sense of things. It has a lot of wisdom. So this is a time too for just anyone who wants to share what that experience was like. Did it bring up some challenges or questions or wonderings that you'd love to get some support with? Yeah, Renata.
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, it was very impactful. I'm not used to opening the space of that. So different things in a little bit of a scary sense, because the sensation comes, and for instance, for me was very clear, and emotions like, so what stops me from putting the boundary? Sadness. And then a wave of that sadness that it's can be a little bit overwhelming for me. And then what's the cost? And then a very sharp pain in my throat, like boom. And wow. And so and also just noticing. And my question is, when we sense that, you mentioned Ram before, presencing would be very important, but what to do really when
Yeah.
all this stuff starts coming up? What would be
Okay.
the best?
Thank you. Great question and a great level of somatic awareness. So, what to do when that comes up? Well, take our course and we'll teach you.
Very good.
I would say so one thing is that with this kind of, I call it somatic literacy, and to kind of expand a little bit on what Kali was saying about the wisdom of the body, this is pretty much accepted and known now. If you look at how what's the word? The Body Keeps the Score, it became this, huge bestseller suddenly because people are starting to understand that, we live in a society that tells us you can analyze your way through life, and you can't. So we bring in so many somatic wisdom cultivation exercises, primarily stop, drop, and deal. What does that mean? That you learn to self-regulate before you engage. So particularly when there's an uncomfortable sensation in the body, it's a sign to take that pause and be present with yourself. And we really go into this in the course. I think it's pretty much part of every class. No, Kali? We have some somatic presencing exercises, so that you can start to understand, well, what is your body telling you with this sharp pain? What does sadness feel like in the body? What is it related to? There are layers and layers there. So there's no like quick fix, but stop, drop. I actually say stop, drop, feel, and then deal. That's kind of, a simple formula for something that we spend 14 weeks exploring. In the class itself, if you're having something come up, we're always ready to just like jump in and start working, because typically that means there's a learning possibility showing itself. And in terms of just coping in life when that's happening, again, we give a lot of tools on that.
One of the things, and thank you for being brave, Renata, and being the first to ask a question, because Ram and I will each take a turn with everyone who puts their hand up. But one of the things I think that we like to teach is that these sensations that come are not a problem to be solved. And we live in a culture that says, oh, that pinch in the throat, or that sadness, or, this is a problem and it should go away or it should resolve itself. And one of the things that you learn to cultivate is the ability to just be with the feelings and to slow down and just be with them. And even now in this moment, if you can just be with the tightness in the throat and be with the sadness, it may not be comfortable, but it's not dangerous, right? Yeah. And our culture has made these sensations dangerous. Well, they're not dangerous. They just don't feel great. That's all. So, you're invited even now in this moment to just be with those experiences, and later, if you're present with those experiences, your mind will be much more creative about what to do about the situation. Is it time to set a boundary, or do I need to do it in a different way? But the first step is to be present with the sensations. That's the first step. Yeah. Great.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
Sure. And can I also just add one thing here? A simple exercise like that itself is teaching your nervous system. I mean, I don't know who else felt that that's something about having the facilitated guidance or the permission to actually go in and look at this stuff, which normally we tend to avoid. Something like that feels like you're meeting yourself on a deeper level, that's very much part of how we start to heal and shift these patterns.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
Bill wrote along.
She did. Do you want to read it out loud, Rom?
You want to read it out loud, or should I?
I'll read it. Wonderful exercise. The cost of setting a boundary with a good friend of mine will be the risk of losing the friendship. Yes. She talks nonstop to me as her friend, but when I start to share things that matter to me, she doesn't listen deeply like I do for her, and rushes me or does dishes in the background or makes noise or says she needs to go. This irks me greatly, yet I cope because sometimes she is attentive and cares about me, and we've known each other for 40 years. So does this sound, anybody else have a situation sort of similar, like, so yeah, so, oftentimes the reason we do avoid setting a boundary is somewhere in us, we realize it's going to change the relationship. Very often people who do end up in our course setting certain boundaries that need to be set. And of course, the course is not just about setting boundaries, but the boundaries are such a hot button for so many. So we definitely have a lot of time with that. They often discover, much to their surprise, that they've been inventing a whole story about the person. And when they do go and have the courageous conversation with the person, it turns out the person really meets them there and the relationship changes for the better. I would say the majority of the time that happens. Sometimes it means kind of the relationship ends because you're changing the game. You're changing the rules of the game. When you change the rules of the game, some people don't want to play that game anymore. And that is often the risk. But then I would ask, what's it costing to keep the relationship at the level that you're keeping it? And you might notice it costs a lot of, reduced energy, a lot of air, a lot of mind space, a lot of time and energy on your part. What would you add, Ron?
I think you address that pretty well. It's a matter of I think as we go through the course and we're really mindfully exploring this question with a lot of tools, your ability to decide for yourself what is okay and what's not okay is going to increase dramatically. Because you'll finally recognize and be able to much more come to terms with what stops you from making that decision for yourself. And what's you look at the cost, you look at the potential risks of taking action, and we just find people making huge shifts in that department. Let's see, we got a couple hands raised. Yes.
Jean, your hand is raised. Jean Blessing, what a nice name.
Yeah, you're blessing us with your hand. Want to unmute yourself, Jean?
When I thought about a situation, what came in my body was like an anxiety and fear. And yet I know I don't really have to be fearful, but the story is I have a neighbor that periodically asks for plants for my garden. And I always say, sure. And this year, I had in my mind, he can have any plant, but I don't want to divide this clump and of plants. And sure enough, he says he wants some of those plants. And I said, oh, I really like them the way they are. And he says, I only want 6 or 7. It's not gonna, you won't even know they're gone. And I went into this kind of freeze flight, and I can't remember what happened. I think I just walked away and
Mm.
nothing was resolved. And I felt bullied I felt bullied. But so I go to tell my husband and what happened, and he says, give him the plants and keep the peace. And I thought, oh. And then I felt like, am I just being that selfish? I mean, he's taken a lot. And I also, this is a side, but I board my horse and people bring in vegetables and eggs. And when they do, I bring some for them. And I'm thinking, why? I just felt maybe un, unacknowledged. I don't know, but I felt the anxiety, but yet I felt the little kid fear and anxiety, like you got to make everybody happy. And especially when I went to my husband, he said, give him the plants. I just, so
Yeah,
that's my story.
Great example.
thank
Yeah,
you.
great example.
Yeah, Brom, go for it.
Well, I would love to work with you to help you develop for yourself just that sense of self-agency. And the way you described how when he made the request and you kind of didn't want to do it, you went into a freeze, that is exactly what happened. Your nervous system, for some reason, this reminded you of something from your past. It's probably childhood stuff, and we don't go deeply into the therapy of it, but that's why something a little trigger like that can just send you into this total fight, flight, or freeze, because your nervous system was actually interpreting it as a threat to your survival. And that's exactly your, how to say, your learning edge, where when you can start just to stay present enough, and we really encourage people to start with like baby steps. Don't try to change the whole thing at once, because it's just you're not gonna be able to do it probably. That slowly you get back your sense of self-agency, and I'm guessing in some respects you might not have felt that for a while. Are you still? Yeah, there you are. Can you remember, like, at what point in that whole series of events, where did you feel that it was going out of your control?
Well, really out of control was he said, I only want 6 or 7. You'll never know they're gone. And it was, oh.
What was that saying to you? I mean, what was the implied message there?
The message was sort of like, I want this, and I'm not really taking into consideration that you said I kind of like them the way they are.
Message was that your boundaries don't matter.
Oh, yeah.
And that is bullying.
That's right.
That's what I felt.
Yeah.
But I don't know what to do about it. And he is our neighbor.
Well, oftentimes when we work with folks, we'll be really clear to help you name things like, yeah, that was bullying. It doesn't mean that the neighbor's a bad guy or your husband's a bad guy, none of that, but it's important to name behavior for what it is. And your desire was diminished by your neighbor, and your desire was diminished by your husband. And And it's really interesting that people get locked into a mindset that says it's either going to be peace or it's going to be conflict.
Mhm.
Well, so who's to say if you didn't say to the neighbor, well, I realize what you're saying is that, I won't notice, but I will notice. And I'd really appreciate if you would just take from the plants that aren't clustered together. That would be terrific. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. You're amazing. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't be peaceful.
Yeah.
We don't
Doesn't mean it
know.
could be.
We don't
Yeah.
we don't know. But your husband has this like, oh, if you ask for what you want, it means it won't be peaceful.
Yeah.
Right? Well, I would argue that peace happens when two people show up respectfully to each other. That's real peace. The other thing is just some other feigned, idea of what peace is. That's not really peace.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
you
such a
repeat
cultural
what you
norm.
said again. It's just like I get so anxious just trying to please people is part of it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Please and appease. This is
Yeah.
the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And fawning is please and appease. So if we find ourselves doing that a lot, it is a nervous system response to a perceived threat. It's not the healthiest. Let me put it this way. It's healthy because everything we do on some level is healthy, but it's not in service to your acknowledgement of your right to have your needs met. Obvious.
Yeah.
Kali, something on that?
Just that one of the things that we will teach you is how to be with your nervous system when it gets dysregulated like this. And caretaking is a stress response. It's something that our brains go into a reptilian, very primitive part of our brain that goes flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. And we'll teach you how to be, again, like I was speaking with Renata, to be with those uncomfortable sensations of, fawning, caretaking, or, pulling yourself away. And just in being with those sensations, it'll help you to articulate something different to your neighbor and something different to your husband. It doesn't have to be conquering Rome in a day, but our job is to kind of turn your internal compass setting just 10 degrees to the left, that you can articulate something a little bit differently than you have in the past. And that slight shift is going to set you on a different trajectory, right? So today, what we can do is validate your feelings, validate that you were in fact bullied out of your needs and points of view, and all in the name of peace, which isn't peace at all. It's just subjugation, basically. So,
Thank you.
sometimes just being validated is also helpful. That you're not crazy, you're not hypersensitive,
Thank
right?
you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. A couple of things in the chat came in that I just want to address. Phil is
Yes.
talking about highly sensitive people. Hard for highly sensitive people to stand up to bullies or think fast on our feet.
Yes.
And then further down, highly sensitive people have extra sensitive nervous systems. Yes. Hard for us to talk back to bullies or defend ourselves or think fast. Totally. That's why we made this course. Because highly sensitive people, when they become empowered with a sense of healthy self-entitlement and more able to navigate these sort of situations, are healers. Have a tremendous amount to contribute to relationships and to society. That's what we feel, in the bigger picture sense. So, and often for such people, I don't know about you guys, but I know we're in grade school, did I learn about healthy self-regulation? If anything, they teach us the opposite.
Yeah.
And then Alicia wrote, why do we feel we have to please people we have people please to begin with? That's a great question. And I would typically invite the questioner to ask themselves why they do that, rather than starting to give an answer. That's just the way I like to work with people. But Kali, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that you said that, because the why, oftentimes the why isn't that important. Really, the question, the more powerful question is, how can I support myself to do something different? That's the more powerful question. The why could be family history, trauma, all kinds of things. And sometimes that can help, but the other question really will lead you on a direction that's more powerful.
Yeah. And, I would say it depends on the lens you want to look through. If you look through like that our behavior is determined by nervous system self-regulation, that's why, because our nervous system feels we need to get back to a place of safety. So it's just it's a kind of an autonomic response almost. Okay, let me be nice and I will feel better.
Mm-hmm. A lot of
We,
it is cultural, a lot of it
yeah.
is cultural. We live in an oppressive culture. We just do. So our institutions oppress us. Our education system oppresses us. Everything's sort of built to serve interests, that would want to benefit from our kind of bending and acquiescing. And it's not a conspiracy. It's just, this is what happens inside an oppressive power over culture that we all live inside of. So how can we, one of the things that we teach is to somatically integrate ways of being that give you a sense of healthy self-entitlement and self-respect and self-agency and dignity, and come from that embodied place inside a world that works very hard to want to change you for its own gain. Mm-hmm.
Alicia had her hand raised. Is it something you still want to bring, Alicia?
Hi, Kali. Hi, Ram.
Hi, Alicia.
Great to see you. And it's really just to share a comment, seeing the list written out, just supporting the impact. And I'll just say, yesterday was very impactful. And when I saw overfunctioning in my email today, I was really compelled to join in and consider continuing the search and the journey of understanding the dysregulation of the nervous system as being someone who's been engaged that way for all of my life. And the big question was, what is the cost? And that's finally resonating and making sense to me. And I'm becoming aware of the cost of not being regulated or having the tools and collecting them over time. But yeah, for me, it's the previous speaker, it was sadness, and there are many other emotions that come into play. But I realized for me, it's fear, just absolute fear of someone's reaction, and then my own response and reaction, and sort of losing myself further. So anyway, it's more of just a comment, I guess, for now, but thank you.
Thanks, Alicia. Gonna do the course with us again?
I have been considering it for a little while, and I think the first time brought awareness to these issues, and that, and we've been talking now for a couple of years on our Life Lab, and I am definitely in a different spot than the first time and ready for the next course of action for my life. So I am considering it, yes.
That would be awesome.
It would be awesome. I'd love to be with you.
Thank you, Alicia. One of my favorite points, and Ram and I were talking about this yesterday when we were preparing for this webinar, is the definition of boundary. And we love to use a definition that we borrowed from a woman, a therapist named Lisa Dion. And it is the boundary. A boundary is that place at which I begin to lose myself. And which is a really interesting kind of reframe on what a boundary is, because in my brain, when I was first learning boundaries, I kind of thought of these very rigid structures that were like, no, you will not cross this line in the sand. But really, this other definition is much more fluid and in the moment, and is very somatic. So I'm in a conversation with someone and it's all feeling really good, and then suddenly, oh, I have this weird twinge in my stomach, and I realize that this person wants me to share something that is not for her to hear. And so that's a moment for me to, I would lose myself if I continued down that road. I would lose a sense of my values, a sense of my ethics, a sense of where I stand on confidentiality. And so I just guide the conversation somewhere else. That is a boundary. And so it invites us to be really present in the moment with ourselves and feel, oh, am I, in giving that extra plant or allowing the extra plant to leave the bundle, am I losing a part of myself there? I am. So I'm going to just gently nudge this person into another direction.
Or
yeah, sometimes we have to go like this.
not so gently.
Yeah.
Can I dovetail on what you just said about
Please.
the
Yes.
boundary? It's interesting the way you said it, because I being a somatics guy, I think of it in terms of felt sense. So if, I just want to offer to people, if you come back to the exercise we were doing at the beginning and you just take a moment and tune into your felt sense of being here and sense kind of the solidity, groundedness of having the body. And then you bring to mind that situation where you need to set a boundary. Again, as you feel that in your body, very often that'll bring up a sense of, for many people, a dissociative feeling, or the fear that starts to come up is often the nervous system's response to a sense of loss of self. And what is self? What does it really feel like? There's a very subtle parts of the exploration, but we also go into that dimension of it, because it's clearly not just an intellectual or a mental shift that we're going for with this work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We also assist folks to cultivate a greater capacity to feel discomfort and not be so, worried or scared by that discomfort, that fear, that sadness. And when you cultivate, the more you feel these sensations, the more they become less dramatic in your body, then the less driven you are to avoid them. And then when you set a boundary, or you make, have a courageous conversation or share impact with somebody, or give feedback, or any of those places, you may still feel uncomfortable, but it won't feel like your skin's on fire anymore. And that makes you more brave and courageous in these spaces. And we also just normalize that it does feel weird and hard, and that's okay. You don't have to feel like, this was great, I set this boundary and I feel so good and confident. It could feel very uncomfortable, but that's okay. It's totally okay and normal and natural. So, Ram, it's 45 minutes. So we do have a special offering. Leah, our marketing director, do you mind to share what that offering is? We have go for it. You have the floor.
Yes, so we have early bird pricing on this course currently, which already gets you a savings of $500. And that is good until August 26th. But for you all on the call today, we want to offer you an additional 10% off of that price, which is another $400 off the course. So that's $900 total in savings for you. And that is going to be Buffalo 10 is your coupon code. And I'm going to put that in the chat right now for you. And that's going to be good for a little bit more than 24 hours. So not quite 2 days, about a day and a half when that code will expire. So we just encourage you to take advantage of the offer so that we can continue this conversation.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Sort of an act now. Go for it.
Jump in. I really enjoyed this group already. It feels like it started to feel like one of our classes in the course already.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, same. So we will take another, 10 minutes or so just to answer any questions that you have around any of the kind of the structure of the course, or what you can expect, or what what any other details of the course. We're happy to, for any of you that want to linger a little while longer, happy to go there or answer any other questions you have. Yeah. You can feel the felt sense of, I want to say something, but and allow yourself to feel uncomfortable and raise your hand anyway. Yeah, thanks, Donna. Anybody? Yeah, go ahead. Go, Ron.
Who had some around the conversation today, any of it, like who had some sense of spark or excitement? I mean, I certainly enjoyed
A lot.
Yes. Yeah.
I had a question. Oop.
Yeah, please.
Hi. This might be an
Yeah.
interesting question because I've got my little guy with me.
Hi, little guy.
I'm Jill, Kelly, Rom. Thank you so much for creating such a wonderful course. I have a question about kind of just energetic boundaries when you can't set boundaries because you're literally a caregiver. And so, you're dealing with a situation where you're actually responsible literally for someone, and how to regulate yourself in such a situation, because I have a lot of challenges with that.
Yeah. Ron, do you want to go first and then I'll go, or do you want me to go?
I was going to defer to you first, since you're the one who has raised little ones.
So and specifically you're talking about being a mama to a small one, hey? Yeah. So that's right. And if you're someone who and with babies, right now, the proximity is so important. So I guess there's a few layers to that. One is a boundary. One is an internal boundary between yourself and yourself. Do you have in yourself a whole bunch of shoulds that you're hitting yourself with? In other words, the neighbor that Betty has, are you like that in yourself? Like, oh, come on, it's just another, you'll never notice. Do you do that? Yeah. So that's maybe a first place to go, is just see where you need to put up a really clear non-negotiable between yourself and yourself, that shoulding on yourself and saying, I need to be a better mom. I need to make sure I'm not on the phone. I need to make sure that I'm like never taking a nap, all of that stuff, that you set a boundary with yourself about that, to give yourself a little bit of internal space. You don't have to be a perfect mom. I don't even think one exists. And if she did exist, it'd probably mess up every baby on the planet, because you being human is what teaches them to be human. So maybe that's just that's an important place to start. Does that resonate for you?
Yes, there's a lump in my throat. Yeah, he's got things to say about it too, but I think I am my own best agent and my own worst enemy in setting boundaries. I know you're saying hello too. But being able to set boundaries between self and self, and letting go of shoulds around how I show up as a mother is huge. That's a great call out. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, and you were talking about specifically setting boundaries with your child.
Well, I didn't quite know how to phrase the question. I just wanted to throw it out there and see what kind of came my way. So I didn't specify.
Well, you know, if you join, the little one, I'm sure, would also get a lot out of the course.
We've had many babies on the course.
Yeah.
Emmett, would you get a lot out of the course?
Yeah. But seriously, you learning and exploring the issue of boundaries will really help your children. Because they're learning, they're picking up that information from you automatically.
Yeah.
Just a thought. Alicia writes, I struggle being dismissed on my parenting preferences by extended family. How many times have we had people deal with this in the course, Kali?
Yeah.
It is not uncommon at all. And I'd say there's a lot of work we can do around that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have about 5 more minutes. Anybody else want to be brave like Jill?
Thanks, Betsy. Yeah, chime in. Any thoughts? Need not be how do I deal with this, but just questions about theory or
Thanks,
anything.
Betsy.
Right.
Okay. Well, we create a really wonderful, safe learning community. You, should you choose to join us, you will learn that you have a wonderful group of allies that will be at your back and at your side as you learn and grow. Somehow the courses that we create online are incredibly safe, and people learn to stretch into outside of their comfort zones, and real shifts happen for people, including myself. I want to say I continue to be benefited by this material, and I'm so profoundly grateful for it, and grateful for the opportunity to be in a learning environment on this really, really important and kind of, edgy topic. So we're so glad that you joined us today. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ron.
And thank you. And I also just want to double down on how we create a strong learning community. I mean, we have people doing a lot of interactive exercises. Every week there's homework. We pair you off with somebody. So you form a really good bond, as the work goes on, as the course goes on.
Yeah.
Looking forward. Anybody who wants to join, more than welcome.
Thank you, Ron. Any last words, Ron, before we say goodbye to everybody?
Last words are, I'll see you on the course.
Thanks, everyone.